Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a quick message before we get started. I really believe that it is more important than ever that we build and support economies based on fairness and justice. The genocide in Gaza has highlighted how the economy can be a driver for evil if we're not really thinking in systems. Thinking in systems means that we're aware of all the impacts we have with the money we spend and the actions we take. So, see everything you do as a vote for the future we want, and don't underestimate the impact one person can have. Especially in the eyes of Allah, everything you do can be huge. So, thank you so much for listening. And this interview with Iman is an amazing example of how we can all contribute to building economies of fairness. Jazakumullah khairan and Assalamu alaikum. In the Quran, Allah tells us that we are the stewards of His earth. As Muslims, we have a responsibility towards Allah in regards to His creation. On this podcast, I'll talk to Muslim sustainability leaders worldwide, and we'll discuss our challenges, emerging solutions, and how we can all make a difference. My name is Ilyas, and I've been working on sustainability for over 10 years. I'm grateful that you've joined us on this journey as we explore what it means to be a steward or Khalifa of the earth. Today, my guest is Iman Masmoudi. She's the president of Tuniq, a North African artisans cooperative crafting regenerative fashion from sheep to shop. You can find more about them on tunicoasis.com. She holds a bachelor's degree in social studies from Harvard and a master's degree in classical Islamic history from the University of Cambridge. She's currently a third-year student at Harvard Law School. Iman, salamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me, Ilyas.
Wonderful. Yeah, so we've actually spoken twice before, right? And I've been truly fascinated about your work. The first time was at the Faithfully Sustainable Summit, where you were both a speaker on the first day and then a panelist on the second day. And I have a lot of questions because you are a puzzling character, subhanAllah. It is, and then I'll hope we get to the bottom of it. But
Maybe you can help me figure it out.
Yeah, right. I think the most interesting observation, I think, that describes you quite well is the fact that we had the entrepreneurs panel, right? And I just could not get any sense that you were in it for the money. There was such a true passion from you in creating something that is good, and I'm really interested to learn where that comes from.
Let's talk about it, inshallah.
Yeah, but what is the story behind sheep to shop? Because I think it's important to understand that, and then from there we can learn more about your own motivations and see why you're in the business, in the fashion business, which is a hard one to be in.
Yeah, I mean, so sheep to shop is really quite a literal description of our supply chain and production process at Tuniq. So, from the wool, from partnering with shepherds, we're there when the sheep get their annual haircut every spring, and our artisans along our supply chain that we created, wash the wool by hand, spin it, weave it, dye it using natural herbs, all using traditional crafts. So the entire supply chain happens kind of in-house. And really how that developed was just out of asking questions and seeking as close to like perfection as we could get. So I started Tuniq with my mom just after I graduated from college. And originally the vision was very simple. It definitely wasn't to create our own whole supply chain from end to end or something. We just wanted to support artisans in Tunis, where my family is from. And we wanted to do it ethically. So we thought that all that would mean was buy some fabric at a store and take it to some seamstresses and pay them fairly, pay them whatever they want and, make some ethical clothes. But then once we started asking a lot more questions about, wait, hold on, okay, where does this fabric come from? How are these colors achieved? We learned that really the environmental harms and the labor exploitation of the fashion industry is all along the supply chain. It's not only at the garment factory, which is often what we hear about. We hear about the idea of sweatshops and we think that that's the major issue. It is definitely part of the issue, but the whole part of the supply chain is also causing enormous harm. So, my mom and I basically started asking, well, can we get our own fabric? Can we get our own weavers? Can we get our own thread? Can we get our own wool? And, going back to the source. And it involved a lot of just going around the country and meeting people in their homes and following rumors of hearing that there's some shepherd who has a lot of brown sheep in this random village and just showing up, having tea and, spending time with people. So it was a beautiful
What led
year.
to you asking those questions in the first place? Because I think a lot of people skip those questions, right? Because you were doing something that is not normal to do anymore, right? Asking those questions. Mm, what led to you and your mother asking those questions?
Honestly, that's a hard question to answer. I think it's really a confluence of many different factors. Obviously, for me, the most important one being Islam. Uh, I I think another is just how my parents raised me. So, uh, you know, my parents are very politically active, and they always taught us from a young age that our purpose in this world is not to like make money and have comfortable lives, but is as Muslims to use all the privilege that we've been given growing up in the US or the education that we might be able to attain to be of service.
Hmm.
And so, to do good. And so when it came around to the idea of starting this business, like you said, I really wasn't in it for the money. I was at that point already planning on going to law school. And I had this I had this required deferral. So it's this like law school program where you apply early and then you're required to take at least 2 years off before you go, because law school it's a graduate degree in the US. And so we were just starting this project. It really was just to help. And so the idea that we could be causing harm inadvertently through doing this project was just so far beyond the pale. Like it was just unacceptable. Yani,
Hmm.
there was no the whole point of the project was to be of benefit and to help people. So we had to do it right. I mean, it wasn't even a question. I don't know how to give you more insight into
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of let's take a different right
Yeah.
a different fashion company as perhaps as an example who wants to create something that covers a man's aura when he is doing exercises, right? There I think we often create a purpose driven company, but then oversee some of the harms that come as a result of creating something, because you want to create something affordable or practical, or and then as a result there is some harm that we either don't know about or oversee. And I just think it's interesting because that is kind of picking the harder way, right, from the beginning, but trying to do it right from the beginning. And I know you don't agree with me with saying that it is the harder way.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm just curious where the insight to do it in a different way came from. But I understand that it's hard to describe if it's part of your upbringing and how you were raised, and alhamdulillah, your parents as well.
No, alhamdulillah. I mean, I we can definitely talk about how and why I disagree about it being the harder way, but I take your point, Yani, in the sense that it's different. It's definitely different um, than what most people do. I have to be honest. I think there's a combination um, of privilege, honestly, right? So maybe for a lot of people starting businesses, if it doesn't succeed, they're that's their lives. That's their livelihood on the line. And
Mhm.
so, you know, many times people don't have the ability to take the risks that come with trying something different. Because if it fails, the results for them and for their families might be catastrophic. So, Yani, I think there definitely is an element of that for me and my mom, this was something that we weren't even planning on like taking a salary or any profits from it ourselves. The goal was, it was a business model, but the goal was purely to support these artisans. And, we each had our separate career plans outside of this project. And so we were very willing, I think, and able to take any risk. And we were, in fact, perfectly happy to, if the project is going to fail because we're not able to reach this ethical standard in a successful way, then it's going to fail. And that's better. That was a better alternative for us than, doing it in a harmful way. So I think there's definitely an element of, the fact that we were able to do that is something that not many people are able to do.
Yeah.
But I think the other element is just, wanting to try it. So even alongside the upbringing, I had myself a very negative perception of business, to be honest. I did not view it as like a noble thing to do. And of course it is in our tradition as Muslims, a blessed thing to do, to provide a service to the community in this mutually beneficial way. But I didn't have that. I had not internalized that idea. I saw it as something bad and harmful. So I had this almost guilt that we were even starting a business. And I had to work through that and try. So for me, it was like, well, if I'm going to do this thing, which is not so good, profit seeking, I want to make it as beautiful as I can possibly make it and make myself become attuned to it and feel comfortable with it. So a lot of it was about my own comfort as well, and my own journey around changing ideas or coming to my own kind of theory of business too.
Yeah. Did you take the time to learn more about the Islamic perspective of business? Because it's not, it's not capitalist, it's not communist, it's not socialist, it's in between all of those, right? It has elements, but it's like you said, the perhaps almost purpose of business in Islam is to be useful for your community, and then as a result, if money arises, that's wonderful. But the profit is not the goal. Did you have to study, and if so, how did you do that?
Definitely. That was a huge part of the journey for me, was studying and also speaking to the artisans, right? So these are traditional communities who have been, trading and doing business for thousands of years without
Yeah.
destroying the planet or
Yeah.
exploiting each other, yani. So I think it was both of those things happening in parallel. Just seeing how beautifully they approached business relationships, how human it was, the experience, how caring and thoughtful, even though we both know we're here sitting down for some sort of transaction, but it's just full of love and barakah and the idea that, that everyone benefits. There's like this magical alchemy,
Yeah.
that two people who don't know each other, they come together and somehow everybody is better off through this partnership.
Yeah.
And then I definitely, studying Islamic history, I really focused on, I wanted to know not just, what the hadith and the Quranic verses related to trade and commerce were, although those are very beautiful, of course. And we actually, a few years ago, we released like a collection of 40 verses that inspire us in terms of like as kind of sacred economics. That's a term that we use a lot at Tuniq, of this approach to kind of a more spiritual, hopefully inshallah Islamic approach to business, that we don't view the world as this materialist space, that there's a spiritual reality underlying all of these things. So we had this collection of 40 verses. We have a journal called the Oasis Journal, and people publish in it every now and then, any Muslim thinkers or non-Muslim religious thinkers from other traditions. But then it was also studying history. So you mentioned my master's. Like when I did my master's, one of my major papers was about studying the institution of the muhtasib throughout Muslim societies. So the market overseer and what their role was and what the ethics of different merchants were, and how this was regulated. And that was really also deeply, deeply inspiring to me and very exciting to see. We have we have a pretty big free market bent, I would say, in our tradition. anti-monopoly, anti-price fixing, all of that stuff. But then we
Hmm.
also have, I think what's often overlooked is that we also have a strong tradition of regulation and market oversight, because we know that there can be abuses in the market, and that's always also been part of Islamic history.
Wow. I did not know of that rule. The muhtasib. So that was a function? That was someone's job, or that was an office
Yeah, yeah.
overseeing
So
the market?
yeah, so it started as I think the Amil as-Suq, or something as-Suq, was the earliest position during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Multiple people were appointed to be the market overseer. And then, as the Muslim community expanded, I think, I'm not sure the exact time, within a century, within 2 centuries at least, there was always that market overseer, but then it expanded into this position of the muhtasib, which in nearly every like major Muslim city, there would be this person appointed to be mainly the market overseer. So they would make sure that, they would do everything from making sure that like uh, the scales that merchants were using were not unfair, like
Skewed
out
in,
of
yeah.
balance.
Wow.
And or they would check the weights that they were using to make sure that they were standardized. Or that, bakers had to have like filters on their oven to prevent too much black smoke and air pollution. So
Really?
there's all these
Yeah.
elements that were involved in the role of the muhtasib, from everything from like health and safety, pollution, to just fairness. They would also test different products to make sure they weren't being adulterated. Someone saying this is 100% honey or something, but then actually, it's only 90%, which is something that we still deal with
Yeah.
when we shop, today. It's kind of like this consumer protection element, Yani. There were all these
That's
different
wonderful.
government agencies.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Oh, that kind of makes me really want to dive into that topic, but that's not what we're here for today. But the muhtasib, oh, I know definitely. Is this so? You did a study on this? Can we read that somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a pretty short essay that actually was focused less on the market side and more on the morality policing side. So the only thing I have on my blog on the Muhtasib is not actually about their role as market overseer. It's about their more peripheral role as kind of like upholder of public morality.
Hmm.
And I have a short, blog post about that. But there's tons of books about the Muhtasib. I think um, Kristen still has a book that, and forgetting the title right now. But you can also just read. Some of their manuals have been translated into English. So, like Mawardi's Ahkam al-Sultaniya is translated into English, and you can read. It's kind of like parts of it are basically a manual of how to do the job of a muhtasib. And so he goes through, you know, what all the different merchants can do to cheat people and how to
Really?
watch out for them.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a very interesting manual as well. In English, it's, Al-Mawardi Ordinances of Government.
Hmm. Okay. I'm gonna look into that, inshallah.
I recommend.
Yeah. So now you getting back to you. So perhaps unintended, but as a result of your initial intention to help these people and almost offer a platform to them for people to have access to their products, you are now partly responsible for a whole supply chain, right? Or colleagues or people you're working with. What is the responsibility you feel within your business for the people you work with? And what has been the role of Islam in how you deal with all these people?
I mean, it's huge. I have to say, I think, um, I pictured it more as like kind of like me coming in as this benevolent helper and, giving everybody what they need. And, but it's, it's really not like that. It's these people, first of all, almost all of them are older than me.
Hmm.
So, they treat me as like their daughter or their niece or something. And it's really a very familial relationship. And it's one of mutual care.
Hmm.
So, if I'm sick or I'm in trouble or something, they help us. And when they're sick, and we always know, what's going on in their lives, where even if we're not there in person, but we like to visit at least a few times a year because they're spread all over Tunisia, all over Tunis. We're at least weekly phone calls, if not almost every day. And when sometimes they come to Tunis seeking medical treatment, we pick them up from the bus stops and take them around what they need. And there are all these things that are outside of the scope of what you might think of like our business or what the actual project that we do is, that it's just once you have a human relationship with someone, then that is the most beautiful way to be in community. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about business, and about, at least for me, working on Tuniq, is how it builds these relationships and how it brings people into the circle of benefit, and it creates a wider and wider net so that people are have these relationships with one another. But then within the scope of the business, obviously, I'm really concerned with making sure they're getting paid immediately and fairly. So like we never negotiate prices down, and we're often watching because we have multiple artisans who do the same thing. So sometimes one artisan will call and say, hey, this new project, actually it's taking me more time, so would it be okay? I actually, I need to raise the price by like 10 dinars or something. And then we're like, no problem. But then if she does that, then we're going to call everyone else who does the same craft as her and or is doing the same project as her, and they're going to get the same price that she is getting. And maybe they didn't ask for it, or they were too shy to ask for it. So I think that's a big part of it. And, we're very, very concerned with making sure, like, forecasting our finances, making sure that we're never late with payment, that we're never making people wait. And I remember one time, very early on, actually, maybe just a year into Tuniq, it was still just me and my mom. And we would still be driving around, picking inventory up in person and paying people in cash before we figured out all our fancy banking stuff and we got everybody set up with a bank and with a tax ID number and everything.
Really? Yeah.
We visited we were at the end of a leg of our trip, and we were running out of cash. And we didn't think it was a big problem. We would just go to the ATM and draw out more cash. But both of our debit cards were expired, and we had no idea.
Okay.
So we went to our Amriyad, who's our lead weaver, and we've been working with him from day one. A lot of people who follow Tuniq, they're like very familiar with his face because he does a lot of the interviews, and he's just a beautiful, beautiful man, and I feel like he's my uncle. And we basically, our heads were hung low, and we had to tell him, like, we're so sorry, we're out of cash. We'll be back to Tunis in just a couple days. As soon as we get there, we'll send you your money. It's deeply apologetic. And his first response was just to say, well, do you have enough money to get back to Tunis safely? Do you need me to lend you anything?
You mean to the US or to Tunis?
To who?
You said back to Tunis safely. You mean to the US safely?
No, back to Tunis. No, back to the capital, Yani.
Oh, okay.
Back to the capital city. No, thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
So we were in the south. We were in Jerba. And we were driving back to Tunis the next day.
Oh, now I get it. Yeah.
Exactly. So we just had, one last leg of this trip to get back to the capital. And his only concern was if we could make it back safely, or if we needed him to lend us money for us to make the last leg of the trip. Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, I was stunned. Personally, I don't know any business in which like a supplier will like offer to lend you money for the safety of your trip. So I think it just shows that there's a world in which you can be dealing with people in a much more beautiful way. All of these are business relationships and transactions. They're selling something that we're buying ultimately.
Yeah.
But
it could be very transactional, right? But guess you made a conscious decision for it not to be.
Well, I think that was always my hope, but I have to say that it was really them who always approached it that way, who always were like, and And I tell this other story often, that one of the first times that we met a random artisan in their home, I was very American about it. I would be trying to like immediately sit down and say like, okay, here's who we are. Here's what we're trying to do. We will offer you this, this, and that,
Yeah.
and it will be good for you in this way. What do you say? And yani, they were just like, first of all, who are you? Like, we don't even.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yani, alhamdulillah, my mom was with me, because she would just be like, Iman, you need to calm down. We're going to have tea. We're going to talk for a few hours. Maybe we'll come back tomorrow. We're not
Mm.
bringing up this business stuff until, there has to be trust.
There is a relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, there has to be a relationship. And
Mm.
that's how the artisans that we met always approached it. That was just their ethic and way of dealing inherently already. So
Yeah.
yani, in theory, maybe it was something I wanted, but it was something in practice I had to learn from them.
Yeah. Could you? That's beautiful. I like that vision, right? Of really investing in the relationship, and as a result, creating quality and equality and fairness with the people you work with. Could you tell me a little bit more about the environmental impacts and how you're looking at that and making sure that all those different people all spread out over the country are working in a fair way as well, and limiting their impacts or improving perhaps the way of working, even though they're probably experts in preventing harm.
No, definitely. This was a huge part of like our intervention. So not only it was about finding artisans who had these different abilities and connecting them so that we could have the supply chain, but often we had to intervene exactly for what you're saying, for environmental reasons. So, for example, like um, our weavers, they were doing traditional weaving on traditional looms, but a lot of times they were just buying whatever thread they could get local market, which would be like a polyester blend, or it would be a synthetic dye blend.
Hmm.
And so then we had to come in and be like, hey, try this wool. And then there's a lot of problems that come with that, because hand spun wool is much harder to use, and it creates a lot of problems for the fabric that is a result of that. The
Yeah.
first is just that one of the most basic problems that we dealt with for such a long time before we finally got the quality where we wanted it to be was just little plant fibers being stuck in the wool. So, these are free range sheep.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
going around everywhere they're going, they're getting stuff stuck in their wool, and it's a year's worth of like little pieces of plants and leaves and little tiny, and sometimes they're like sharp, because sometimes these are sheep in the desert, so they're collecting like
Mhm.
thorny, you know, bristles and stuff and tiny little things. And we'll be washing the wool and brushing it and doing multiple stages of this 4 or 5 times. And there will still be, little pieces left in the wool at the end. It's one of the most basic, Yani. It's like a
Yeah.
very unglamorous like problem to have, but it was a very serious problem because um, it
Wool
caused
is your
multiple.
most important part, right? Or
Yeah,
production piece. Yeah.
exactly. And if we can't get our wool to be, soft and comfortable for people, but also even when you're weaving, you need a certain level of smoothness when you're passing the thread along, um, in order for it to not be catching on the bottom threads and all that stuff.
Mm.
So this was like a serious issue,
Yeah.
that we had to, develop strategies and work with the artisans. Another serious issue was when we started plant dyeing. So we wanted all of our colors to come naturally. And we basically like formed a workshop of women. Some of them had done some plant dyeing before, but it wasn't really their like major expertise. Some of them were much younger. Some of the older ladies knew a bit more what they were doing, but we had these small pots, and it's very hard to standardize color across plant dyes. They're very fickle. Really,
Yeah.
like the mechanics of this
Yeah.
are really the most serious challenge. Like
Mhm.
once you decide to do something environmentally beneficial and sustainable, there's so much beauty there, and I want to talk about that beauty.
Yeah.
But the
Please.
challenge of like, not letting the quality drop. In fact, trying to raise the quality even higher. So like plant dyes, you can get a different color because of the ambient temperature in the air, or because of the same exact tree will give you a different tone of color in August versus in December, because this is, these are seasonal things.
It's
So,
it's
so
nature, right?
it's
It's
nature.
not the same every time. Yeah.
It doesn't want to be standardized. It doesn't want to be mechanized and commercialized. And
Hmm.
and you work with it as much as you can, but then you also have to try to reach something that people will find beautiful and be happy with, because
Yeah.
it's gonna be expensive. That's something else we should talk about.
Yeah. We should.
But yeah, and it
We
has
should.
to reach the quality, and that was a big challenge. But and sometimes there were artisans who weren't willing to work with us on that. That was another
Hmm.
thing that happened too. Sometimes we would meet with people and we would say, we want to try it this way, some environmentally better way, and it would just be harder for them, and they just didn't want to do that.
Hmm.
And that was fine. Even when we would say, like, but we'll pay you, like, of course it's harder, so we'll compensate you for your time. But they would just say, no, it won't work. It's going to fail. And I don't want to I don't want to put my labor into something that I know is not going to come out
Might not
nice.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. Just as a matter of pride in their work.
Hmm. So
Um,
are you now also saving the age-old crafts or bringing them back into this age? Because it almost sounds like you're rediscovering or re-establishing some of these crafts that were there for a long time, but that now have to be that were not really profitable, so they were dying, right? Um, Even though it would be wonderful to have a multi-generational thobe because it's made out of wool, so it will stay there for a long time instead of the polyester thobe that breaks after a couple of uses.
I think that's right. And I think that's a huge uh, part of our mission as well, is that these crafts are so beautiful. There's so much that we can learn from them. And I mean, in the sustainable fashion space, this is me riffing a little bit. This is my view. It's maybe controversial,
Okay.
but there's just so often this kind of like people bashing their head against the wall of like, how can we possibly produce clothing in a way that doesn't destroy the environment? We have to invent all these new things. And basically there's just a lot of like reinventing the wheel. And so,
Mm.
I'm sure, and and we have made advancements ourselves. There is technological progress that can be made and that would be helpful in this area, obviously.
Yeah.
However, traditional communities are sitting there and they're like, we've been making clothing without destroying the planet for thousands of years. Like,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science. It's not some secret mystery that we have to put the world's greatest minds to uncover. I mean, there's a way to do it, and
Yeah.
it's been done. And we can, build on that, of course. But I think that, as much as we can preserve that, because it's a whole world of knowledge, you look at it as some simple thing, but it really is a form of artistry that once lost can never be fully recovered in the
No.
form that it was, because it's built on centuries of experimentation and wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you sure that none of your artisans are now keeping their sheep inside to prevent the plants from getting in the wool? Because that would be the simplest solution, right? To just say no, these sheep are staying inside.
I'm sure, because I see the plants still in the wool.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. So because I think we're so used to cutting corners, right? To be like, well, these sheep. Let's take the sheep for example. There's so much
Mm.
plants in the wool. Let's keep the sheep inside, or let's move to a synthetic fiber, or let's. How did you set up the baseline or the ethics for your business to ensure that you're not cutting corners?
Again, I really don't know how to answer that. We just
Mm.
never consider. We just never considered doing those things. For
Right.
us, I mean, it's like it's there's something fun and beautiful about it. So maybe we should get to the why it's not the hard root conversation.
Yeah.
Yani, a lot of the times when all of these options are cut off for you, what do you have to do? You have to be creative. You have to think of something.
Mm.
And now you have a problem you need to solve. And this is often like what entrepreneurs always say they love so much about starting a business, is the problem solving aspect of, okay, I can't do it this way. I can't do it that way. Those ways would would solve my problem, but I can't do them.
It's not, yeah.
But so I have to figure something else out. And that's really an exciting thing. And through that process, you learn so much. So, like, one thing that, for example, the simplest thing, are labels, the little clothing labels that go on at the end. We spent all this effort to make like an ethical garment. We have this coat. It's 100% wool. There's no toxic chemicals in it at all. It's completely handmade. Everyone in the supply chain was paid fairly and treated well and everything. And then we have to put a clothing label on it. So what do we make this clothing label out of? How do we do this we're not going to ruin it at the end with like a polyester plastic label. I considered, so you consider every option. You just get creative. Like, we thought about, do we even need a clothing label?
Yeah.
We don't really care about like Tuniq branding. So, do we need it? But then we found out you actually legally have to like
You
label.
have to put on it. Yeah.
You
run
have to
into
label clothes.
limitations. Yeah.
So we're like, okay, what can we do? We thought about just getting scrap fabrics and handwriting our labels. We did that for the first couple of times just while we thought of an interim solution, because it's obviously completely, so inefficient and just takes so much time, and then it'll just wash out anyway. And so then we went to like a label printer, and we had several meetings with him over many weeks. We were like, look, we can bring you these scrap fabrics. We found these, dead stock cotton fabrics that were like being thrown away. They were 100% cotton. And this was still not a perfect solution that I was happy with, because long term, where does this, like, to have to continuously buy this cotton that we don't really know the source of. But anyway, we were like, how can you print on this in a way that is free of plastic? And he was like pulling out all these things like, oh, look, I have this beautiful. And then I would touch it and I'd be like, I think this is plastic. Like, what is this material? And then, he'd be like, oh, so you guys are like very serious about this.
Wow.
And then he was like, what about this ink? And I was like, yeah, I'm just not sure. Is this like a vegetable ink, vegetable water-based ink, or is it like, all of this stuff? And eventually, and this is still not the solution that we have now. We actually have a better solution now. But eventually we settled with him on, actually, he had a laser printer. He could like burn things. So he burned our text of our label into the cotton.
Wow.
So that it was no ink, and it was on and it was on cotton. And that was our solution for a few months. It still was not that good, because the exact heat of the laser, sometimes it would burn all the way through. Sometimes it was too light, and then also it would a little bit wash off, although there would still be a trace. Anyway, eventually we settled on leather. We found a traditional leather supplier, and we realized that you can just make a brass mold and stamp it into leather, and you can read the text without any ink, and all of it being completely organic. So this was like a whole journey that we went on just to figure out some way to make little clothing labels that have the required legal information in a way that causes no harm at all to anyone. And I have to say, I think this goes to the, the beauty thing, is at the end now that we've gone through this whole process, we have these leather handmade clothing labels on all of our clothing items. This is like a very luxurious, beautiful thing. And people often see it and they're like, wow, how nice, a leather clothing label. So fancy.
Must be good. Yeah.
Yeah. So high quality and so beautiful and special. And really, it was just a journey of trying to find some way. And so often I have felt so many times that trying to find this, creative way within the limitations of our values has led to a solution far better and more beautiful than what we would have done if we were willing to settle. And it just has elevated our work so much.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah.
Did that answer your question?
No, it did. It did. Yeah. So it's at the one hand, you're saying it's creative problem solving, right? You're setting these limitations for yourself, where you're like, well, it has to be natural, it has to be non-harming, it has to be durable, and then within those confines, you search for a solution. But that sounds like the hard way to me, and I know, and I'm not trying to be annoying, but and my deep hope is that it will be ethical businesses, Muslim businesses that show us different ways where we come out of this environmental crisis, right? Where we show different ways of alternative ways of doing things that are not based on harm and exploitation but based on cultivation and growth, inshallah. But because you're doing something that is different from what is mainstream, there is more struggle in there, and that is doing it in a hard way. And then your beautiful answer when we last spoke was, I don't see it as a hard way because there is no other way. All right, and you're at the end of the day you have to answer to Allah, and that's there. Yeah, you're not gonna explain why you cut those corners and went for the plastic label. So I get that.
I mean, this is something Muslims are so used to doing, right? It's like all, if you ask a Muslim, like, why do you live life on hard mode? It's
Hmm.
not just in business. It's not just for people trying to set up ethical businesses, but it's all the rules that Muslims follow daily in our lives. It definitely comes with challenges, but we think it's better for us and we think it's more beautiful, and we're used to doing it. So it comes naturally on to
Yeah,
us as a community.
mashallah. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I agree. You've used the word beauty a lot so far in this interview. Speak to me about beauty. What is beauty, and why is it important for you as a metric, or as a value, or as an end goal in your business?
You caught me. I do think that the concept of beauty is kind of at the core for me of doing a project like this, or even just living life as a Muslim. I mean, so even the word Hasan in Arabic, of course, it has the meaning of beauty, but it also has the meaning of excellence or correctness, or doing something right. And ihsan is about pursuing excellence, but it has that root of beauty. And I think that it has always been the case that for us as Muslims, the concept of aesthetics is deeply intertwined with ethics and with actions. That something, cannot be beautiful unless it is morally right. These are like deeply that they're almost the same thing. That you
Yeah.
describe something as ugly, if it's morally wrong, if it's wrong
Hmm.
for us as Muslims. I mean, I think Allah uses these terms that way in the Quran, but also just all throughout the history of the Ummah. That when Muslims have pursued outward beauty, that it always has to have a relationship to an inward beauty. And so I think that's very true with clothing in particular. I mean, this is something that adorns us, it beautifies us,
Yeah.
and it has that aesthetic attribute
Hmm.
that people are always looking for. Um, and I think it's absolutely crucial that it has the inner beauty as well, that it's made not in ugly conditions. Um, you know, there's a verse of the Quran that I'm forgetting the chapter and verse number right now, but it talks about three things about clothing: that Allah gave clothing to humanity as a blessing. That's one. And two, that clothing adorns and protects us, that it does these two things for us, that it beautifies us and it protects us. And three, that the best form of clothing is the clothing of taqwa, of God
Hmm.
consciousness. So we often talk about that verse in Tuniq as like kind of this three-part vision of what the ideal of clothing should be, and what adorning us, means, that it's acceptable for clothing to be beautiful, that it should be part of like dignifying humanity, but it also has to have this God conscious element.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I view beauty as it's a holistic concept, and it's like almost synonymous with good with me, but it ties in that visual beauty, which is also aspirational for us as Muslims. Beauty is it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I like that. I like using beauty also because I guess it's a good conversation starter. It's also a good way perhaps to communicate or to invite to a larger audience, right, about the essence of your business. But I don't think I've often seen beauty as one of the ethics of a business, right? To have beauty as one of the ethics of your business, I think is really really original well, at least for the businesses that I've seen.
Mm.
Because it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure beauty, but if you bring it back to ihsan and if you bring it back to taqwa, then there is a baseline there, right? Of what you think you can explain to Allah once He
Yeah.
asks you about your processes and what you've done and your ambitions and your
And I
yeah.
think you feel it, by the way. I mean, so, Tuniq has been for me an enormous journey, and it's completely changed me as a person. Yani. And one of the most basic ways is that my um, you know, my aesthetic sensibility has fundamentally changed. So,
Mm,
and I think that's part of it. So I used to think that certain flashy things, were attractive and beautiful. And my mom talks about this a lot, that we both kind of have had this experience. But now, now when I look at clothing, I pretty much I can tell like if it's polyester or like made in fast fashion or something,
yeah.
and it just has no draw at all to me anymore, whereas it
Mm,
used to hugely. And my mom talks about the same thing, that like now when you look at something and you know what's behind it, it's not like a pro con list in your mind of like, oh, I really like this, but too bad it's unethical or something. It's that it's literally not attractive anymore.
mm,
It's like not beautiful anymore because you've had this transformation of heart. And so I think they're very, yeah, they're very interrelated, and people feel them, like people feel the difference. There's
mm.
this, you know, baraka element, maybe is another way to put it, that that all of us can feel and sense. And we know that it's intertwined with like what beauty is to us, even who's
Yeah.
setting that standard.
Hmm. Is it also about a deep understanding of something that changes your perspective, right? You now know you know the sheep to shop of clothing, so you have a deep understanding of what clothing is and what when it is good and when it is well, not good. And I can imagine that process of seeing clothing go from sheep to shop also changes how you look at the not beautiful, to use your words, clothing, and how that changes you. So is that then also the first step or the advice you would give to either aspiring entrepreneurs or people already in business to have a deep understanding of what you're actually doing, to understand where the beauty is within there, where you can improve the beauty?
Definitely. And the only reason I'm not fully um, adopting what you said is because I think that um, it's not a fully rational process. So it's
Hmm.
not like I, you know, it's not like I have a conscious thought of, oh, this is made of polyester and the workers were exploited, and that's why it's not
Beautiful.
beautiful to me anymore.
Hmm.
It's just the immediate reaction. It's like, when it's almost, it becomes innate, becomes part of you. Like when you're just like disgusted by something, it's a reflex. It's not something you've consciously chosen for yourself. So I think, yes, definitely to what you've said, that's absolutely necessary. But also, embrace, I guess, the transformation that your own sensibility will go through, that you will train this in yourself, that you'll have almost, these natural reactions to things that will make it impossible for you to even approach them, even if you wanted to, or try, rationalize your way. Um, so it's both.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. I agree with the pushback. That is not a purely knowledge based journey that you're doing, right? It's not something you do in a course, or perhaps you can, but it's not. there's intuition and feeling in there as well as knowledge.
Yes. And there's transformation. Like
Hmm.
you will be different.
Do you now have people coming up to you with business advice? People who also want to start an ethical business or want to perhaps even address an issue that they see within different communities. And what is the advice that you give to them or to aspiring entrepreneurs wanting to do business either radically different from the beginning or who already have a business and then want to change it?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of people actually because um, I see um, it- I see Tuniq as we've talked about this before. I see it as an experiment, as proving a model, as testing and proving a model that it is possible
Yeah.
to create fully, holistically ethical clothing. And I think we're always still testing that model a little bit and improving it. But I want to see that model or something similar replicated all over the world. I don't want Tuniq to be the only one.
Hmm.
So I talk to people a lot who, you know, maybe they're from, Bangladesh or Thailand or Egypt or Lebanon or something, different places, and they're thinking of starting a project that's attuned to their local community. So there's definitely a lot to say. I think that maybe I'll try to distill just a few points.
Mhm.
For me, a lot of it is just giving them encouragement. So don't be afraid to do things different. If something, doesn't sit right with you, I mean, really demand the highest level of yourself and your project and say, don't, whatever someone tells you you have to do, it's just a necessary part of business. Throw that out the window
Hmm.
and think for yourself if something doesn't feel right. Like one of the weirdest things, I'll give you an example, that we do that people always tell us is a mistake and, is not, it basically people giving business advice and stuff. But our customers love it. And our community, I find it really inspiring, is the fact that we don't do paid social media ads.
Hmm.
So we just don't believe marketing is like a whole big challenge for me, around how to find an ethical or beautiful way to market clothes, especially in a world of overconsumption.
Hmm.
So we thought a lot about like, what is the vision of offering an invitation to people who will benefit from it without, shoving it down people's throats. And so showing up uninvited in a social media ad was not something that we wanted to do. We like
Hmm.
to have, organic growth or go places where people expect to be sold to, showing up in different like magazine promotions, places where people expect promotions.
Yeah, because you don't want to
or want them.
create unnecessary want, right? That's
Yeah,
that's the reasoning behind it. Yeah. Hmm.
absolutely. It's also so that we as a society can have like places of peace where we're not constantly being sold to. Like I was at the beach with my family over the summer and we're swimming on the beach and you would think there's nowhere that an advertisement could find us there. But then there's these planes flying overhead over the beach with banners of ads. And then even beyond that, there were boats
Really?
coming by. I swear, subhanAllah, where the entire side of the boat was like a, screen, like a billboard, but like a
Hmm.
moving screen with
Oh, like
ads.
a digital actual
A
screen. Wow.
digital, the entire side of the boat was huge. And it
Wow.
was just these playing ads and the boat was going back and forth. And to me, I was just completely like floored by this, that there's
Yeah.
nowhere we can go
Hmm.
where we're safe from being constantly, um, you know, made to want more than we have or made to spend money or to consume.
Yeah.
So I think it was part of this whole vision of, I just don't like any of that. So we're not, doing social media ads. This is like an extreme position. It's something that, is based in me and my mom's values. But that's something that we do, for example.
Hmm.
That's weird. A
Yeah.
lot of businesses don't do
You
that. And
don't
a lot
want
of
to make any money. I said it before. Yeah.
we make money. I feel this is important to clarify.
Okay. Good. No, that's good.
But yeah, I just want to encourage people that wherever their values feel a sense of discomfort with
Hmm.
what they're being told is necessary to do, to honor that feeling and to follow that. And also, you might find analogs. So I compare, I imagine it. I'm like, were there billboards in Muslim cities? No, even the Muhtasib's journals talk about the ethics of not having merchants be aggressively pulling people into their shops.
Really?
Yeah, they talk about
Mm.
that. So I think that's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it just encouraging the wannabe entrepreneurs out there to think about every choice that you make in your business is an ethical choice. You're
Hmm.
going to either put out more beauty into the world, or maybe it's just neutral and you make that decision for yourself, or maybe it's adding to something that you don't really believe is good as a Muslim. And try to do it differently. It's okay to fail and to experiment, but at least try. And I'm sure that there will be people out there who come up with much more beautiful solutions and alternatives than the little things that we've been able to do at Tuniq. So the more Muslims doing that, I think the far better world that we will have. And I think it's the core idea really of your podcast as well, is that we have something to offer as Muslims to the world, that there are these crises and we have a model, something beautiful that can provide solutions to these issues. And so
Inshallah.
standing for that,
Yeah.
and being, proud to build something different as Muslims and represent that is perhaps, the core of the vision of what we
Yeah.
should be doing, I think.
Yeah. Mashallah. That was beautiful.
Thank
So before we close it off. So when will you and your mom or Tuniq, when are you successful? Or do you have how do you measure success? Is it an increase in sales? Is it not selling more because you have a certain limit in mind? Because that otherwise you exceed, the boundaries of your artisans, or how do you measure success? What are the different measures you have?
Mhm. I'm not sure we do, but I'll try to
Mm.
answer your question anyway.
Well,
Um,
maybe you don't have any measures. That's also an answer, right? If it's a conscious decision not to have those indicators.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's just that that we feel we're so happy with what we've done. We feel so blessed that with what Allah has allowed us to be part of. But it's also, I've never felt that it's done.
Mm.
I've always we always have like, okay, the next step is, we want to fix this thing about our fabrics. We just spent the past like 8 months redoing the lining in the sleeves of all of our coats to be 100% silk, just purely so that you can have the experience. Because when it was cotton, you put your arm in the sleeve and then there's all this friction. It's super uncomfortable and then the coat doesn't hang right. The drape
Mm.
of the coat is very like bunched up and not,
Okay.
elegant. And then you have this awkward experience. You can't put your sleeve in the coat and that makes the item not wearable. So all these tiny little things we're constantly, trying to improve. However, I think there have been many, many moments um, of feeling this sense of um, I don't want to say pride, but just just joy and gratitude that, wow, we have reached something that we didn't even necessarily dream of, didn't know what was possible. So maybe
Mm.
I'll just share a couple of those moments. So
Please. Yeah.
one moment was when that same weaver I talked about earlier, Hamad, was telling us, this was just a couple years ago. He was just talking about his family, and he was saying that how he's training his son in the craft of weaving because he feels that which he wasn't doing before, because now he feels that there's really a future for him there, and that he's, for so many years, he's earning a lot more in his community than many of his neighbors. He's got like one of the highest incomes in his neighborhood, for example. So um, the fact that he actually saw that future for his family and was investing in his children on this basis, that was huge for us. Mama and I
Wow.
definitely
Yeah.
cried over that and talked about it. Like, we cry a lot, Yani, doing Tuniq. There's many emotional moments.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe there are these little victories. Like, for example, when we get like published, when a magazine reaches out or something and we get published, or when we get these beautiful messages from customers. I mean, and yes, if it wasn't a privacy violation, I would pull up these customer messages right now. They're so beautiful what people send us. It is such a privilege to be able to receive something so beautiful where people are like making dua from your business, from all corners of the world. People are saying, someone sent a message that I always remember, and they said that you have a heart praying for you from this corner of the world, and your business is a shining minaret in a dark industry. I always remember that phrase. Yani,
Wow.
it was just such a beautiful message, and so kind of that person to send it. So yani, all of those daily interactions where we have the experience and the blessing of connecting with people on the other side, our clients and customers, and we see in their words how the work of the artisans is touching them, and how they get it, they get the idea, and how deeply it's connecting with them. That really is, I mean, just also makes us cry a lot. Yani, just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And such a privilege. We feel, honestly, my mom and I feel so so grateful and so like outrageously honored that we are allowed to be the people doing this work. And it's like through no, independent virtue or something, just through pure blessing from Allah, that you get to be part of something so beautiful and have it like attributed to you, even though it's built on the work of so many other people.
Yeah. Mashallah.
It's those moments,
Yeah. I can understand that feels like success, and I think it's also maybe success is not the wrong the wrong word, right? It's about knowing whether or not you're doing the right thing or doing something close to the right thing, because it's not about success now, but it's about the path, right? And the journey
Yeah.
towards doing something good.
Yeah,
That
that knowing that you're
requires
on the right path, I guess, is how you just put it.
yeah.
Yeah, is how it feels.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. That's so beautiful to her. That is a beautiful metaphor. A shining minaret in a dark industry. That will stick.
Alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful to that person for writing that message.
Yeah.
I would
inshallah.
say their name, but it was a private message. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but please don't. That would be better. Well, Iman, Jazakallah khairan so much. I've learned a lot, and it's really nice to have these examples of an ethical business, right? Or businesses trying to do it in a as close to the Islamic way or the prophetic way as possible, and learning and failing and trying to get closer. So I wish you a lot of barakah in your path, and I hope you and your mom will succeed, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your time and your knowledge. Once again, the website is tunicoasis.com, so please take a look. If not to buy anything, I'm not sure if you would encourage people to buy. So, or it would be to take a look at the story, the beautiful pictures, and really
The
learn
videos
more
of the
about the people
artisans.
behind it. Exactly.
Yeah. No,
And
thank you so much. Also, Ilyas, barakallahu feek, for this beautiful project, and all that you're doing and bringing together all these different Muslim voices for our community, and also your day job where you also work on sustainability, mashallah. So thank you so much for having me be part of this beautiful endeavor.